"Don't do this to me," Quinn Alcott whispered to the most dangerous man in New Orleans. "Just tell him we're together. You don't have to say anything else. Just stand here and let him think it." The man she was whispering to had a wolf tattooed across the left side of his throat, a jaw that looked like it had been cut from quarry stone, and eyes so dark they absorbed light rather than reflecting it. He had not smiled at her. He had not moved away from her trembling grip on his forearm. He had simply looked across the marble floor of the Langford Grand's Emerald Ballroom to where her ex-boyfriend stood watching them, with the particular expression of a man who had suddenly run out of ammunition. "We're engaged," Cade Ferraro said. Not to Quinn, to Cooperell, clear as a verdict. Then Quinn understood with a bolt of cold clarity that she had just grabbed the arm of a man who didn't do small gestures. Quinn Alcott was the head sommelier at the Langford Grand Hotel, the kind of job that sounded elegant at dinner parties until someone asked her to explain what it actually meant. Then it meant 16-hour days during Mardi Gras season, a palate so precise she could identify a Burgundy's vintage within 2 years from tannin structure alone, and a reputation among New Orleans' most demanding food and wine society that she had built entirely by herself. Without a culinary degree, without a trust fund, without a last name that opened doors. She was 31, a size 18, with thick dark hair she kept pinned because it was practical, and a laugh she rarely used at work because she had learned early that women who looked like her weren't allowed to take up too much space in any direction. Cooperell had taught her that, not with cruelty at first. In the beginning he had been brilliant and charming and so enthusiastic about Quinn's expertise that she had believed, genuinely believed, that he loved her exactly as she was. Cooper wrote food and wine criticism for 3 national publications. He had a following, he had opinions. He had, eventually, a new girlfriend who weighed exactly what the women in his columns always implied they should weigh. He had broken up with Quinn 2 years ago in an email. Not even a call. An email, and then 3 weeks later, he published a review of a tasting menu at a celebrated French Quarter restaurant that referred to a sommelier whose personal relationship with indulgence might be interfering with her professional judgment. He never named her. He didn't have to. Everyone in her world knew exactly who he meant. Quinn had survived it. She had gone to work the next day in her best blazer, recommended a 2018 Gevrey Chambertin to a table of 10, and held herself together by sheer stubbornness until she got home and then sat on the bathroom floor for a while. That was what surviving looked like sometimes. Tonight was the Langford Grand's annual Preservation Society charity gala. Quinn had curated the entire wine program herself. She was mid-explanation of a Rhone Valley red to a board trustee when she felt the familiar sinking sensation of the room shifting around her in a specific way, the way rooms shifted when someone she had been dreading walked in. Cooper arrived with his new girlfriend, Ashlyn, who was luminously thin and wearing something ivory and strapless. Cooper's eyes found Quinn across the room in under 10 seconds. He always had that particular radar. He steered Ashlyn toward the wine table with the confidence of a man who had never once doubted his own welcome. "Quinn," he said her name like they were old friends, like the email had never existed. "This program is incredible. The Rhone selection alone." "Thank you." Her voice was professionally smooth. "Enjoy the evening." She tried to move away. He stepped with her. "No, seriously. I want to feature the hotel's wine program in my spring piece. I was hoping we could talk." He glanced at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I see you're still stress curating. The canapé selection is a little heavy-handed tonight, don't you think? Might want to mention that to the kitchen." Not loud enough for anyone else to hear. That was always how he did it. The quiet erosion, intimate enough to leave no evidence. Quinn's hands went cold, her chest tightened. And then she turned, because she needed somewhere to look that wasn't Cooper's face, and found herself looking at the man who had been standing 3 feet away in silence for the past 90 seconds, nursing a glass of water he hadn't touched. Cade Ferraro was attending the gala because his real estate group, Ferraro Development, had provided the lead sponsorship. Publicly, he was a developer. He had rebuilt 4 blocks of the warehouse district and restored 2 historic hotels. He employed hundreds of people in the city. He paid his taxes through 6 layers of accountants. He was also in the careful documentation of the FBI's New Orleans field office, the head of the Ferraro crime family, a syndicate with entrenched interests in the port of New Orleans that no federal prosecutor had yet managed to prove in court. His shipping operations moved legitimate cargo and, according to sealed affidavits, some things that were not. He had never been charged. He had never been convicted. He had, however, been under active surveillance for 14 months, which was creating a significant problem for his upcoming license renewal with the Port Authority. What he needed, his attorney had told him with great delicacy, was the appearance of a quieter and more settled life, something to complicate the federal narrative of him as a destabilizing force. What he had not anticipated was a woman in a black wrap dress gripping his forearm with both hands and whispering a desperate proposition into the side of his face. Cade had looked at her, truly looked. He saw a woman with intelligent, terrified eyes, and a spine she was holding very straight despite clearly running on her last reserves. He saw the man standing behind her, still smiling with the satisfaction of someone who had learned that this particular kind of pain didn't leave marks. He made a calculation and told Cooper Rell they were engaged. The look on Cooper's face was worth considerably more than whatever this arrangement was going to cost him. "We should talk," Cade said quietly to Quinn, once Cooper had retreated toward the champagne station, looking deflated, privately. They used the hotel manager's office, which Quinn unlocked with her staff keycard. She spent the first 2 minutes apologizing. Cade spent 1 minute listening, then raised a hand. "I'm not here for the apology," he said. "I'm here because that was useful, and I think we can make it more useful, for both of us." He laid it out plainly. He needed 3 months of visible, credible domesticity, a fiancé who was respectable, professional, and entirely unconnected to his world. Quinn was, as far as he could assess, exactly that. In exchange, she would have the full weight of his name and his protection for the duration, and Cooper Rell would spend those months understanding what it felt like to stand on the wrong side of power. Quinn looked at the door. She thought about the email. She thought about sitting on the bathroom floor. She thought about the fact that she had built an entire career on the ability to identify truth from a single sip. And what was true right now was that the most dangerous man she had ever met had just publicly claimed her in front of the person who had spent 2 years trying to make her feel unclaimable. "Deal," she said. The next 48 hours were a lesson in what it meant to have resources without limits. Cade arranged for Quinn to move into the hotel's owner's suite and sent a stylist named Wren, not delicate despite the name, a small, fierce woman with paint-stained fingers and strong opinions about everything, at 9 the following morning with 3 full rolling racks. When Quinn reached for black, Wren removed it from the rack without ceremony. "You do this," Wren said, not unkindly, because someone told you smaller means better. "But you're not small, so stop performing small." Cade appeared in the doorway of the suite sitting room an hour into the fitting, coffee in hand, and watched without commentary until Quinn stepped out in a deep wine-red gown, structured at the waist and generous everywhere else, cut to the precise shape of her actual body, rather than the body she had spent a decade apologizing for. He set down the coffee. "That one," he said. "It might be too much," Quinn said reflexively. "Quinn," his voice was low and completely certain, "nothing about you is too much. Stop listening to people who needed you to be less so they could feel like more." It was not a compliment, exactly, more like a correction of the record. Quisson stood in the wine-red gown before a full-length mirror and, for the first time in longer than she could calculate, didn't immediately begin looking for ways to minimize what she saw. The following evening, The Preservation Society hosted its donor dinner. Smaller, more intimate. The people with real money rather than the people who wanted to be seen near real money. Cooper was there, because Cooper was always wherever prestige gathered. Quinn arrived on Cade's arm and felt the room quietly reorganize itself around her in a way it never had before. The gown was a statement. Cade was a force in a charcoal suit built for his specific and substantial frame, his hand resting at the small of her back with the certainty of someone who had never once questioned his right to be exactly where he was. He had produced a ring in the elevator, deep red ruby, pave-set diamond surround, and slid it onto her finger without theatrics. It caught the light at the ballroom entrance. She heard Cooper before she saw him, that particular half-law he used when something caught him off guard. Then she saw his face as he registered that she was real, that Cade was real, that none of this was going away. His champagne flute tilted. He caught it, barely. Cade played devoted fiancé with the exact precision of someone extremely skilled at playing roles. He held her chair. He had remembered everything she had mentioned the night before. Still water, a small plate before the wine service, and without drawing attention to it, those things were simply present. He listened when she talked with other guests, with the focused attention of someone who genuinely wanted to understand what she was saying. At one point, he offered her a candied fig from his dessert plate, and looked at her with an expression so unguarded that she missed the next 2 sentences a guest directed at her. Cooper found her at the bar during a break in the program. He had been drinking fast. She could tell by the looseness at the corner of his mouth. "Whatever you told him, Quinn, it won't last." His voice was low and mean. "Men like that don't actually want." He gestured at her vaguely, comprehensively. He'll figure that out." She had heard versions of this sentence her entire adult life. She knew precisely how it was engineered, to find the existing wound and widen it quietly, the way cold water finds a crack in stone. The words didn't reach her, because a hand closed over Cooper's shoulder, not roughly, precisely. Cade turned him, not toward Quinn but away from her, and said something at a volume that didn't carry past the 2 of them. Quinn watched Cooper's color change from ruddy to significantly paler, watched him nod twice, quickly, like a man agreeing to terms he couldn't afford to refuse. Cade released him, straightened his own jacket with 2 fingers, turned back to Quinn with the composed calm of someone who had simply handled an administrative matter. "He won't do that again," Cade said. He offered his arm. "Dance with me." They were on the floor, moving slowly to something orchestral and unhurried, when the service doors at the far end of the ballroom opened the wrong way. Quinn registered the sound a full second before her brain could classify it. Sharp, not musical, nothing like glass or silverware. Her mind tried to route it toward something harmless and failed. Cade didn't hesitate. He pulled her down and in the same motion put himself between her and the sound, moving with a speed that belonged to a different man than the one who had been feeding her figs 10 minutes ago. His left arm locked around her, iron solid. She could feel his heart rate through his jacket, elevated but controlled. A soldier's heart, not a panicked one. His security, 2 men she had registered peripherally all evening, but never quite focused on, converged from different directions across the room. Cade had her moving toward the service exit before the second shot sounded, low and fast through the screaming. She lost her heels somewhere on the parquet. She didn't stop for them. In the alley behind the hotel, an armored black Suburban was already running. Cade put her inside first, then folded in after her. It was only when the doors sealed and the vehicle accelerated into the New Orleans night that she saw the dark stain spreading across his left sleeve. "You're hit." Her voice came out entirely steady. She had no idea how. "Graze," he said, already pulling his jacket aside to assess with the detached efficiency of someone who had done this before. "Are you hurt?" She wasn't. She was shaking badly enough that her vision was slightly unsteady, but she wasn't hurt. Quinn pulled at the lining panel of the gown's overskirt. There was more than enough fabric, and pressed it against his arm without asking permission. He hissed once through his teeth. "Who were they?" she asked. Cade was quiet for a moment. The SUV moved through the dark, and Quinn kept her hands firm and still. "A rival operation. Out of Baton Rouge. They've been looking for leverage," he paused. "They knew exactly where I'd be standing at exactly what time. My schedule isn't public information, Quinn." She understood what he wasn't saying before he said it. "My security pulled the exterior camera footage. 20 minutes before the shooting, someone left the ballroom, made a 3-minute phone call, and came back. The number he dialed belongs to an associate of the Baton Rouge family." Quinn's hands went still against his arm. "Cooper, not a question. He knew my name. He knew you were with me. He called the people most likely to want me dead because I embarrassed him in front of 40 people." Cade's eyes found hers in the dark interior of the vehicle. "He didn't consider that you were standing right beside me. He decided not to." Quinn sat with that. The man she had spent 2 years still unconsciously measuring herself against, still allowing to occupy space where her self-worth was supposed to live. That man had just tried to have her killed because his ego was bruised. "What happens now?" she asked. Cade reached across with his uninjured hand and covered both of hers, which were still holding the compress against his arm. "Now I handle it," he said. "The question is whether you want to be there when I do." Handling it in Cade's methodology was surgical and merciless and traceable to nothing that couldn't withstand scrutiny. Cooperell's 3 publishing contracts were terminated within 72 hours, each citing editorial review. The review had been initiated when an anonymous package arrived at each publication's ethics board containing documentation of Cooper's undisclosed conflicts of interest, years competitors of his family's investment firm never disclosed in any byline. The documentation was entirely real. Cade had simply ensured it found its way to people who would know what to do with it. The police, meanwhile, had a considerably more serious matter on their hands. The Baton Rouge call was on Cooper's phone. Federal agents, already peripherally aware of the rival family's activities, moved with unusual speed. Cooper was arrested at his apartment on conspiracy charges. 2 news cameras happened to be in the neighborhood. Quinn watched the footage from the sitting room of Cade's private estate outside the city, where they had spent the past week while his shoulder healed. She was wearing one of his sweaters, which was enormous on her and warm, her feet tucked under her, a mug of coffee balanced on her knee. She felt, for the first time in 2 years, genuinely light, the way a room feels after a window's been opened. "You're not sorry," Cade observed from the doorway. "Not even slightly," Quinn said. "Is that a problem?" "No." He crossed the room and sat across from her. He was quiet for a moment, which with Cade always meant something was building. The arrangement served its purpose. The Federal Review has already shifted its focus between the arrest and he paused briefly, the public story of me settling down. Quinn set down her coffee. There it was, the end of the 3 months, the deal reaching its conclusion. She had always known it had one. "I'll have my things moved today," she said. Her voice was smooth. She was exceptional at smooth. "I want you to know I'll be completely discreet. You don't need to worry about." "Quinn. The ring I'll obviously return. I know it wasn't actually." "Quiet, immovable, stop." She stopped. Cade reached into the chest pocket of his shirt and produced a ring she had never seen before. Not the ruby. Something different. A deep green emerald, square cut, set in warm gold that looked intentional in the way of something old and chosen. He held it between his fingers and looked at her with the same directness he applied to everything, the same quality that had made her trust him before she'd had a single rational reason to. "The arrangement is over," he said, "because I'm done pretending this is an arrangement." He didn't make a speech about it. He wasn't a man who did. "I don't want a business agreement. I want the woman who pressed a piece of $1,000 gown against my arm in a moving vehicle without blinking. I want the woman who built something worth having entirely on the strength of her own judgment, and never once got the acknowledgement she deserved for it. He paused. Stay. Not as an arrangement. Because I am asking you to. Quinn looked at the ring. She thought about the email, about the bathroom floor, about all the years she had spent believing that the people who diminished her were telling her something true about herself. Then she looked at Cade Ferraro, who had called her his fiancée before he knew her name, and had spent every day since treating that claim like a fact of the universe he intended to honor. You said we were engaged the very first night, she said, like it was already decided. It was, Cade said without drama. I just needed you to catch up. Quinn laughed. It came out surprised and completely real, the kind of laugh she hadn't produced at full volume in years, and it felt like something that had been held down for a long time finally being released. She held out her hand. He slid the emerald onto her finger. It fit as though it had always been waiting there. Quinn Alcott had walked into that ballroom as a woman who had spent the better part of a decade making herself smaller, quieter, less. She walked away from it as Cade Ferraro's, and, more precisely, finally, completely, with no apology left for anyone, entirely her own.